words. It's not allowed. It's forbidden. It's against the insect law to stop banging and flopping and crawling up the pane, even for an instant. Why don't I leave the office? Why don't I seriously consider, this moment, for instance, what it is that prevents me leaving? It's not as though I'm tremendously tired. I've two boys to provide for, but after all, they're boys. I could cut off to sea, or get a job up country. Or suddenly he smiled at Linda and said in a changed voice, as if he were confiding a secret, "Weak, weak, no stamina, no anchor, no guiding principle, let us call it." But then the dark, velvety voice rolled out, "Would you hear the story, how it unfolds itself?" And they were silent. The sun had set in the western sky. There were great masses of crushed-up rose-coloured clouds. Broad beams of light shone through the clouds, and beyond them, as if they would cover the whole sky. Overhead the blue faded. It turned a pale gold, and the bush outlined against it gleamed dark and brilliant like metal. Sometimes, when those beams of light show in the sky, they are very awful. They remind you that up there sits Jehovah, the jealous God, the Almighty, whose eye is upon you, ever watchful, never weary. You remember that at his coming the whole earth will shake into one ruined graveyard. The cold, bright angels will drive you this way and that, and there will be no time to explain what could be explained so simply. But tonight it seemed to Linda there was something infinitely joyful and loving in those silver beams. And now no sound came from the sea. It breathed softly, as if it would draw that tender, joyful beauty into its own bosom. "It's all wrong. It's all wrong," came the shadowy voice of Jonathan. "It's not the scene. It's not the setting for 3 stools, 3 desks, 3 ink pots and a wire blind." Linda knew that he would never change, but she said, "Is it too late, even now?" I'm old," intoned Jonathan. He bent towards her. He passed his hand over his head. Look! His black hair was speckled all over with silver, like the breast plumage of a black fowl. Linda was surprised. She had no idea that he was grey. And yet, as he stood up beside her and sighed and stretched, she saw him, for the first time, not resolute, not gallant, not careless, but touched already with age. He looked very tall on the darkening grass, and the thought crossed her mind, "He is like a weed." Jonathan stooped again and kissed her fingers. "Heaven reward thy sweet patience, lady mine," he murmured. "I must go seek those heirs to my fame and fortune." He was gone. End of chapter 10. Chapter 11. Light shone in the windows of the bungalow. 2 square patches of gold fell upon the pinks and the peaked marigolds. Florrie the cat came out onto the veranda and sat on the top step, her white paws close together, her tail curled round. She looked content, as though she had been waiting for this moment all day. "Thank goodness it's getting late," said Florrie. "Thank goodness. The long day is over." Her green-gauge eyes opened. Presently there sounded the rumble of the coach, the crack of Kelly's whip. It came near enough for one to hear the voices of the men from town, talking loudly together. It stopped at the Burnells' gate. Stanley was halfway up the path before he saw Linda. "Is that you, darling?" "Yes, Stanley." He leapt across the flower bed and seized her in his arms. She was enfolded in that familiar, eager, strong embrace. "Forgive me, darling. Forgive me," stammered Stanley, and he put his hand under her chin and lifted her face to him. "Forgive you?" smiled Linda. "But whatever for?" "Good God, you can't have forgotten," cried Stanley Burnell. "I've thought of nothing else all day. I've had the hell of a day. I made up my mind to dash out and telegraph, and then I thought the wire mightn't reach you before I did. I've been in tortures, Linda." "But Stanley," said Linda, "what must I forgive you for?" "Linda!" Stanley was very hurt. "Didn't you realise? You must have realised I went away without saying good-bye to you this morning. I can't imagine how I can have done such a thing. My confounded temper, of course. But well," and he sighed and took her in his arms again, "I've suffered for it enough today." "What's that you've got in your hand?" asked Linda. "New gloves. Let me see." "Oh, just a cheap pair of wash leather ones," said Stanley humbly. "I noticed Belle was wearing some in the coach this morning, so as I was passing the shop, I dashed in and got myself a pair. What are you smiling at? You don't think it was wrong of me, do you?" "On the contrary, darling," said Linda, "I think it was most sensible." She pulled one of the large, pale gloves on her fingers and looked at her hand, turning it this way and that. She was still smiling. Stanley wanted to say, "I was thinking of you the whole time I bought them." It was true, but for some reason he couldn't say it. "Let's go in," said he. End of chapter 11. Chapter 12. Why does one feel so different at night? Why is it so exciting to be awake when everybody else is asleep? Late it is, very late, and yet every moment you feel more and more wakeful, as though you were slowly, almost with every breath, waking up into a new, wonderful, far more thrilling and exciting world than the daylight one. And what is this queer sensation? That you're a conspirator. Lightly, stealthily you move about your room. You take something off the dressing table and put it down again without a sound, and everything, even the bedpost, knows you, responds, shares your secret. You're not very fond of your room by day. You never think about it. You're in and out, the doors opens and slams, the cupboard creak. You sit down on the side of your bed, change your shoes and dash out again. A dive down to the glass, 2 pins in your hair, powder your nose and off again. But now it's suddenly dear to you. It's a darling little funny room. It's yours. Oh, what a joy it is to own things. Mine, my own. My very own forever. Yes, their lips met. No, of course, that had nothing to do with it. That was all nonsense and rubbish. But, in spite of herself, Beryl saw so plainly 2 people standing in the middle of her room. Her arms were round his neck. He held her. And now he whispered, "My beauty, my little beauty." She jumped off her bed, ran over to the window and kneeled on the window seat, with her elbows on the sill. But the beautiful night, the garden, every bush, every leaf, even the white palings, even the stars, were conspirators too. So bright was the moon that the flowers were bright as by day. The shadow of the nasturtiums, exquisite lily-like leaves and wide-open flowers, lay across the silvery veranda. The manuka tree, bent by the southerly winds, was like a bird on one leg stretching out a wing. But when Beryl looked at the bush, it seemed to her the bush was sad. "We are dumb trees, reaching up in the night, imploring we know not what," said the sorrowful bush. "It is true when you are by yourself and you think about life. It is always sad. All that excitement and so on has a way of suddenly leaving you, and it's as though, in the silence, somebody called your name, and you heard your name for the first time. Beryl!" "Yes, I'm here. I'm Beryl. Who wants me?" "Beryl! Let me come." It is lonely, living by oneself. Of course, there are relations, friends, heaps of them. But that's not what she means. She wants one who will find the Beryl they none of them know, who will expect her to be that Beryl always. She wants a lover. "Take me away from all these other people, my love. Let us go far away. Let us live our life, all new, all ours, from the very beginning. Let us make our fire. Let us sit down to eat together. Let us have long talks at night." And the thought was almost, "Save me, my love, save me." "Oh, go on. Don't be a prude, my dear. You enjoy yourself while you're young. That's my advice." And a high rush of silly laughter joined Mrs. Harry Kember's loud, indifferent neigh. "You see, it's so frightfully difficult when you've nobody. You're so at the mercy of things. You can't just be rude. And you've always this horror of seeming inexperienced and stuffy like the other ninnies at the Bay.